Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network podcast with me, AJ.
And me, Will.
Together, we will be bringing you our no-holds-barred thoughts, opinions, and detailed analysis on all things Wizarding World. So with that in mind, grab yourself a glass of fire whiskey and settle into this week's episode of the WWN.
Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network with your hosts AJ and Will, streaming to you on all of your favourite podcast providers and on YouTube. On today's episode, we will be discussing the man with two faces, the turbaned Defence Against Dark Arts teacher, none other than Quirrell.
Is that how you say it? Is it Quirrellus or Quirrinus? That is, I swear to God, that is a tongue twister if ever I heard one.
I swear, they purposely made his name difficult to say.
I think they really did. That's why they ended up just calling him Professor Quirrell.
Yeah, nowhere in the book do you hear the full name mentioned.
Not even so much in the book, but I mean, I would love to hear for one Stephen Fry try and say that in the audiobook, but someone actually try and pronounce it in the movie, because I think it would be absolutely insane. Out of everyone, I'd love Maggie Smith. I knew you were going to say that. She'd be rolling those R's left, right, and centre.
Literally, it would just sound perfect.
Yeah, it really would. So, well, what can we tell you about the one and only Quirinus Quirrell? Well, Professor Quirrell, he was born on the 26th of September 1967 or earlier and died on the 4th of June 1992. He was a half-blood wizard who came to Hogwarts when he was 11 and was sorted into Ravenclaw House. And prior to becoming Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher, did you know that he was actually the Muggle Studies professor?
I didn't. It wasn't really until I started reading up about his character that I realised, oh my God, he was the Muggle Studies teacher.
Yeah, I think that you only really get to see that in that app game, which completely escapes me what the name of it is.
Hogwarts Mystery.
That's the one. I got so far into that and then stopped, but I think it's because I stopped playing that purely because you had to wait forever for your lives to regenerate. I might go back in and play it again, actually.
Honestly, that was the one thing that put me off. I got to the point I think that most players got to where it was the first paywall, and it was the devil's snare in the room. You had no choice but to go into that room, and you're just stuck there for 8 days.
Yeah,
and
literally.
I'm not bothered. I'm not paying for this.
Yeah.
So I just stopped playing.
Yeah, exactly. I totally do not blame you.
But yeah, I was absolutely surprised that he was the Muggle Studies teacher, which explains quite a lot about his character, because obviously in the books we get to see how many of the students know who he is, and I think we talked about this in one of the podcasts, and I can't for the life of remember which chapter we were talking about this on.
Yeah,
about how the I think it was Fred and George talking about Quirrell from previous years, and we were like, well, how can he be still here considering the Defence Against Dark Arts teacher is predominantly every year?
Yeah.
And this explains it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it does sort of make me wonder now, Professor Quirrell is not the ideal candidate that you would think of as Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher. Because I get that he, prior to taking up the role, he went and did his whole gap year. It took the year to go and find himself. He found someone else, right enough, in a forest in Albania, but that's another story. But I just do not see how someone being as so timid and almost rattly as what he is, to come in and then teach these students about how to defend themselves against all manner of dark creatures, hexes, jinxes. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not the very first candidate that I would probably put into Defence Against Dark Arts, but maybe people find themselves on their gap year. Yeah. So maybe he found more than what he was looking for in his gap year.
Yeah, exactly.
But absolutely, he's definitely not the first person that I would have put into this post. He is timid. He is not the most kind of self-aware.
No.
But as I did do some digging around his character, he is very adept in both Muggle studies and Defense Against the Dark Arts. So maybe his theoretical knowledge is very good. Maybe it's just his practical application which isn't.
Yeah, true. But then again, you do see that pretty much in every manner of job. Like, you would see it at uni, you would see it at school, that people who might have all the theory, but they've got no idea what to do with it.
I think this is where actually there's a line that I read about Quirrell's, like when he's mentioned again throughout the books, Dolores brings up that he would have been the only Defense Against Dark Arts teacher who would have passed the inspection from the board.
Well, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is.
Honestly, same thought. But it just proves the fact that all the ministry are that bothered about is a theoretical application of the subject. They have no need of like a practical element to it.
But in the nicest possible way, if you, like as the ministry, if you're trying to then come up with new orders to join the department, what good is that going to be?
Literally, every aura is like a vocational study.
Yeah.
Like, you need to be practically good at it, not like being able to know what spells to counteract which. It's just like, can you do the job or not?
Yeah.
Like, you can either do it or you die. That's the kind of like your two options with this job. So surely having the practical application is better than a theoretical knowledge. No?
Well, exactly. No, absolutely. You need to be able to think on your feet.
Yeah, so I think Quirrell was and this is proven right with Quirrell's like whole thing of him like dying against a fucking 11-year-old. But it's that he's very good theoretical component and theoretical knowledge, just not very good practically applying it, and ended up where he was because of it.
Yeah. So let's take it back just a little bit. So Professor Quirrell, in the interim of him after being the Muggle Studies professor, he goes off prior to 1991, and then he becomes the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher after having this gap year in Albania. So during that time when he was on his sabbatical, it was said that he received his staple turban, received it from an African prince as a reward for the disposition of a zombie. And it was also rumoured that he did encounter vampires in the Black Forest, and in Albania he had a bit of nasty trouble with a hag. And also Lord Voldemort. Just saying. But then, prior to the start of the 1991 school year, he took on the job of Defence Against the Dark Arts professor after his predecessor, Olivia Green, resigned and returned to the ministry.
I mean, we all know it was definitely more than just a hag he ran into in Albania.
Yes, it certainly was. He ran into none other than Lord Voldemort. Now, I read something very interesting, that they have essentially said that Professor Quirrell became a temporary Horcrux.
Okay, I found this too. Okay, let me hear your thoughts first, because this made me question everything.
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, right, well, for one, it's on the Wizarding World website. It's canon in the Wizarding World, so that's that's what they're presenting. But I still don't know how I feel about that, because this is the first I've heard of it.
And this is the thing, like, okay, fine, they've put it on the Wizarding World website, but at the end of the day, no one can tell you how a Horcrux is made.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like in my mind, it was always a case of Professor Quirrell was possessed. That's it. He was just a victim of possession.
Yeah.
Because when the body died, Voldemort left.
I think this is it. Like, I don't understand. There's not enough information from the books or any source material that explains what Voldemort became after he was destroyed in Godric's Hollow.
Exactly. I would love to know what happened to him, in that time period, because bearing in mind, Voldemort left Quirrell's body as a puff of smoke, and then you see him 3 years later in the graveyard in Little Hangleton.
Okay, so this was the other bit that I read about Quirrell, Voldemort leaving Quirrell's body. So, okay, yes, we get him leaving a puff of smoke in the films.
Yeah.
But so when Quirrell dies in the book, he starts blistering from Harry's touch, and Voldemort flees Quirrell's body and leaves Quirrell to blister and die.
Yeah.
I just suddenly had an image of this head just like popping off and just growing legs and just like crawling up the stairs.
Just like scuttle, 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 it's off.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like, does he just like pop off and like a little imp body just go, hee?
I mean, that is a thought. Maybe HBO will do something to that effect in the new season.
Who knows? I mean, there's a lot to play with. There's a lot of like grey areas in this.
I know there really is. There's so much more that can be done with this. I think these are the things we need to see.
Yeah, and these are the answers I think a lot of people kind of need answering, because the films left it so ambiguous and the books don't really give you that much to go on.
Yeah.
And if they're looking at filling screen time with filler information, like this is the type of filler information that I wouldn't mind being in the TV show.
Yeah.
Because at least that way it gives us some idea about, one, what a Horcrux actually is, because all we get to know is it's a part of Voldemort's soul. Okay, but if Quirrell is a living Horcrux, does that mean that Quirrell is no longer alive because Voldemort is now present and Voldemort's just controlling Quirrell?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there still part of Quirrell in there?
Yeah, I mean, it really does make you wonder.
And the thing is, they could really ramp this up, and it kind of almost goes into like horror thriller territory.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I feel like this new series should at least be like 9 p.m. post Watershed to get the full effect of it.
Yeah, like it's 12A minimum.
Absolutely.
Like, all the way through.
Yeah. But I did find it quite interesting that the fact that, in the first movie, in the first book, you did sort of get this image that Quirrell and Voldemort were essentially a partnership. But as the series goes on, you sort of dip back into the whole Quirrell era of Voldemort's lifespan. And when Voldemort returned to full power in the graveyard, he even said to his Death Eaters that Quirrell was a fool and he just used him to be at Hogwarts as the Defence Against the Dark Arts professor, essentially.
Mm.
So in a way, I suppose Voldemort did get to teach it.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was just like, at least full circle moment, Voldemort finally got to teach Defense Against Dark Arts.
I mean, small mercies. Small mercies. Take the wins where you can.
Exactly. Speaking of, I don't know whether Voldemort really thought that one through when he possessed Quirrell.
Doubtful.
So for someone who created the Jinx on the Defense Against Dark Arts post, you then pick the Defense Against Dark Arts teacher to possess.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you realise you've got a year to get what you want, right? Like, the clock is ticking.
Well, maybe Voldemort does like to work on like a time frame. Like, this time next year, Davina, I am going to have the Philosopher's Stone. This time next year, Davina, I am going to have my own body.
It's the procrastination monkey thing.
What's that?
Where you need to have like an imminent threat to actually get shit done.
Oh, that? Oh, it's my best friend.
So maybe he is definitely like one of those people who just need a deadline.
Yeah, possibly.
But it's like, do you not think it's like really stupid for Voldemort to link the Defense Against Dark Arts teacher, considering like he wrote the job description of like, yeah, you need to be good at spells. You need to basically not be scared of anything. You need to have good communication skills. Oh, and by the way, you're subject to a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not that much planning. I think he literally, to be fair, it's probably the fact that he was aiming to get the Philosopher's Stone that day in Diagon Alley.
Yeah.
And wasn't particularly thinking he was going to be lingering that long with Quirrell.
Yeah. He had to extend his contract, extend the lease.
Exactly. It went from an AST to a 4-year contract.
Yeah. But, apart from being like, the best little home for Voldemort that Quirrell could be, Professor Quirrell himself, he genuinely was a very skilled wizard, I would say. I think you would need to be, to be the Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher. Certainly, I think during his tenure at school when he was a student, he was one of these people who people doubted him an awful lot. And the only reason that he went for the Defence Against the Dark Arts job is to prove to people that he was a skilled wizard. So I think there must have been some level of ability for him to take that job on. But when you think about it, all of the stuff that he did while Voldemort was on the back of his head, like, I'm very much aware of the fact that it was not Voldemort controlling Quirrell. It was Quirrell's own doing. But, like, getting rid of the troll in the dungeon, jinxing the broom, getting through all of the little challenges to get to the Philosopher's Stone, the majority of that must have been Quirrell.
I think maybe the fact that he had Voldemort kind of with him kind of almost enhanced his powers, I would say.
A bit like a Horcrux.
Yeah. Like the fact that Harry is very good and talented when it comes to spells, but I think a lot of that is predominantly down to him also being a Horcrux. And I think that was then the same for Quirrell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, interestingly, I don't think we ever get a glimpse of this. And maybe actually it's why Harry's scar hurts so much around Quirrell. But later on in the Deathly Hallows, we find that Harry has this affinity for picking up Horcruxes. And I don't know whether or not we get any hints like this in the Chamber of Secrets either, to be fair. And it's around if Quirrell is a living Horcrux, surely Harry, being essentially a living Horcrux again himself, would have some form of awareness of each other.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, because it's almost like, I say it's almost like, it's, in Deathly Hallows Part 1, when Harry sees Bathilda Bagshot and they have that conversation in Parseltongue, obviously, my impression of this is, and I don't know if you would agree, but Harry doesn't know he's speaking Parseltongue at that point.
No.
It's almost the same. So do you think he actually did have this affinity with the Horcruxes, but he just didn't know it? And it wasn't portrayed over as well as what it could have been? Because the Horcrux wasn't even a word that we were thinking of at that point in time?
Possibly. I think like that whole ignorance aspect could definitely write over kind of those few kind of misconceptions. I think that definitely could work.
Yeah. Interesting, though. An interesting thought. I'd be very keen to see how they go with it in this new TV show.
And I'm very surprised that there wasn't any hints to it that JK had written in, considering she thought about so much when writing these books. And like we said about all these breadcrumbs that are just like littered throughout the first book. Yeah. How this is something that isn't written in. And they think this is where the Wizarding World wiki gets a bit kind of too liberal with the stuff it comes out with, because they're the ones who have deemed him as a living Horcrux, not pure canon.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of take this with a bit of a pinch of salt in terms of Quirrell being a living Horcrux for the time being. Unless anything else comes out, I'm just going to take this with a bit of a pinch of salt.
Yeah. Well, true. I'm just having a little look here. I'm curious to know, because it says here on the Wikipedia page that his boggart is Lord Voldemort. I would love to know how we know that.
I literally think it's just a default. Like I said to you, like I think when we did the Weasleys, I literally think that when the Wikipedia page gets hold of a character and they don't know what the boggart is, default is it just infills it with Lord Voldemort.
Yeah, just whack it in. Whack it in.
Like, why not? Why wouldn't it be?
I know. Could you imagine Lord Voldemort's boggart is Lord Voldemort?
Lord Voldemort.
Right, so where are we?
So one of the things that I found when I was like reading through like the Page to Screen books and the character profiles, because actually the Page to Screen had more in it than the character profile book, which I thought was quite a weird one considering it's usually the other way around. And one of the things that came out was the choice of how they were going to style his turban.
Yeah, there is a lot of fabric in that turban.
There is reams.
There is reams. What I will say as well on the back of that, and I never thought I would be saying this, but there are some really nice illustrations of that turban that are floating around that I have seen. But some of them are actually quite nice.
I must admit, I do like Mina Lima's one where you can actually like peel off the turban.
I love that, but it terrifies me that I'll rip it.
Honestly, like tweezers, cotton gloves, the works.
Yeah. The whole shebang. But
one of the things that they decided against was going for a very Indian or Middle Eastern style turban, which would obviously be like most people's first choice when they hear that word. But they went for a Renaissance style, because if you actually look at very old Renaissance pictures, a lot of people around that time did actually wear turbans.
Yeah.
And actually it was more because actually it gave them larger coverage of the actor's head. So Ian's head, it was able to conceal what would be then Voldemort's face.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense actually from a stylistic point of view. I'd say I probably wouldn't have considered.
Yeah, for sure.
And to be fair, I didn't actually really click that it was a Renaissance style turban until I read it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that. I didn't know turbans were used in the Renaissance.
Well, the thing is, like, I did art history as A level, and I think it's one of those things that I tend to forget. And then suddenly when I think back to Renaissance artwork, they are really prominent, especially in portraiture. If you look at most Renaissance portraits, they are wearing a hat or turban.
Saying that though, the majority of the Renaissance artwork that I looked at was when I went to the Vatican, and they all had crucifixes instead of turbans, I would say.
Yeah, that was definitely a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. The more that you know.
Exactly. But speaking of Ian Hart, one of the things that quite made me chuckle was his like adaptation to the role.
Yeah.
So the fact, like, it really surprises me how many or how little of the actors, especially in the first film, didn't really know what the book was about or the character was about.
Well, to be fair, I mean, like, I think that the very early book, Professor Quirrell, the only really thing that you sort of got from him was the fact that he was a timid little man and that he was a teacher. And that was all the source material that you had to work with. And I will say, I thought Ian Hart portrayed him phenomenally.
Well, you'll be more surprised to know that Ian Hart didn't even get that bit of information.
So what did he get?
Well, he went out and tried to be quite smart about it and buy a copy to read the character himself, only to be handed a copy of the Chamber of Secrets.
Oh, you're joking?
No.
I bet you he read that and was like, I'm not in the sequel.
Literally, he's flicking through the pages kind of going like, wait, there's no mention of Quirrell in this book. Like, where am I? Like, I'm such a major character. Where the hell is he?
You did.
You died, sorry.
You did, love.
Could you imagine like getting that role and just being like, oh my God, like I'm like one of the main, like I'm the bad guy in this. And like you're getting to like in the second book, you're like, but I'm not even in this book.
Yeah. You'd be fuming.
Honestly. But yeah, like, so he didn't even like manage to read the correct book to get into the character. So it wasn't really until like he was properly starting the role that he realized what his role was.
Yeah. No, that is actually, to be fair, that is quite good.
But it does amaze me how little, like, because obviously Draco and Tom Felton are the same. Like, he didn't really read the book. He didn't know about the book until properly getting going. And it just amazes me how many of these roles were filled by people who just didn't know the book.
Yeah. I suppose that's like pretty much any other movie or beginning a franchise.
Unless you are talking about the heartthrob that is Eddie Redmayne.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who literally knows so much about Harry Potter that it makes my heart glow.
And we love to see it. That's the way it should be.
Like, if you're going into like it, I don't know if we talked about this in one of the other episodes, but like the fact that Jude Law was playing Dumbledore and didn't know anything about Harry Potter made me fuming. That's
criminal. No, it is criminal, to be fair. It is.
But
whereas for the attention of HBO, I am ready to play McGonagall.
Oh, 100%. Like, I would back that. We need a petition.
I'm ready.
It would just be you and Janice Will fighting for the position.
Do you know what? She would be very good at it. She'd be very good at it.
I'd be there for it.
Is there any other Scottish people at Hogwarts?
Who else is there? I mean, to be honest, you could make any of the characters Scottish. It doesn't say that.
To be fair, if you play Hogwarts Legacy, everybody and their granny is Scottish. And the little villages around Hogwarts are Scottish, but they're like the most Scottish of Scottish people ever.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is, like, you could make Neville Scottish. And could you imagine, like, his gran coming in, Scottish Grandma Neville, like, coming in during the Battle of Hogwarts?
Oh, I'm here for it. I'm so here for it.
I am here for Braveheart.
Absolutely. I'm here for it. Is there anything else we need to say about the dear old Professor Quirrell?
One of the things that I was reading up about was initially like the whole reason Quirrell was actually going in search of Voldemort in the first place, because it seems really odd that he would just be out in Albania looking for Lord Voldemort, and like for what reason?
Yeah, exactly. Like, surely he didn't go looking for him in particular, didn't he?
So he actually did, which was really surprising for me to actually realise. I thought he had just stumbled upon him by accident, because, like, who would know to look in a forest in Albania?
Exactly.
Like, he must have done some proper, like, detective work to figure this out.
I don't know why, right? I do not know why, but I've just got this image of Professor Quirrell on Grindr in Albania and walking through the forest and just like headless torso Voldemort being like, "You're close." You're close. Hashtag no pic, no chat. Into public.
Down low.
Very down low. No, like
mask for mask.
No, Voldemort's camp is Christmas.
So yeah, I found that actually, yeah, Quirrell was going in search of Voldemort on purpose, which is crazy. So he actually went looking for Voldemort because he was, he wanted more recognition, because obviously if he found found Lord Voldemort, he would be able to either like take down Lord Voldemort and be known for that, or one of the things that he was trying to do was actually learn spells from Voldemort himself.
Oh.
So ultimately then ended up being a very bad decision, as we know.
Very bad decision.
Even in Voldemort's weakened state, Voldemort's still able to overpower Quirrell.
Yeah.
Which comes back to like what we said with Quirrell being not the best defense against dark arts teacher. Like, if you can't stand up to like baby Voldemort,
yeah, then what
like,
are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing with your life? Like, come on. So that was always kind of like a little bit of a shock when I read that.
Yeah.
But makes a lot of sense. And Dumbledore actually makes a comment about this, about it being Quirrell's downfall, of him seeking admiration and attention.
Oh, God love him.
I know.
You do feel bad for him because he just had probably all the will in the world and he just wanted people to know that he shouldn't be underestimated, you know?
This is the thing, like, I feel like his intentions were good. I think this is why you feel so bad for Quirrell. And I think this is where we talked about it could be so much more of a horror element or a thriller element, that the fact that Quirrell had been possessed just could have been a bit more. And it could have made the whole situation a little sadder. The fact that Quirrell was trying to do this for good intentions, has been unduly, like, possessed, and just left to die at the end of it.
Yeah, it's a shame. That is a shame. Saying that though, I did read quite an interesting thing about Professor Quirrell's wand. So did you know that he has got a unicorn is it unicorn tail feather? Have I just made that up?
Unicorn tail feather.
I have. I'm having a stroke. Yeah, he's got a unicorn hair core wand, which is considered to be the hardest to turn into dark wizards, essentially. But because Professor Quirrell already had an interest in the dark arts, he became a dark wizard, which was relatively rare for something which has got unicorn hair as a core. But the wood that he had is an alder wood, and it's the most suitable for wands for non-verbal spells. And you did not see him cast a single spell with his wand or verbally. It was all non-verbal.
Yeah, I think this is actually one of the things that I was reading up about Quirrell's like powers or like his skills and attributes, was he's very good when it comes to non-verbal spells. And we see that actually even in the films with the whole kind of snapping his fingers and fire coming up out the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in the book it's slightly different, but we'll come on to that next week.
Yeah. Obviously there was slight disparities, but still having that mastery over non-verbal spells is a skill in its own.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is quite interesting. The fact that, so one, he's a Ravenclaw, which you wouldn't expect to be someone who would go over to necessarily the dark side, but also someone with a unicorn hair wand.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, one of the things I picked up on was about the disparity that I had throughout the book, that obviously, as if you've been listening to us read through all the chapters, one of the main things that I have with the Philosopher's Stone is the lack of input from Dumbledore and Snape.
Yeah.
When it comes to Quirrell's intentions to steal the stone. It's almost like Dumbledore and Snape are just like, yeah, we'll just let things carry on as they are, and hopefully won't get to the stone. And they knew it was Quirrell.
Yeah, which I find mad.
Like, is Dumbledore just sitting in the background just going like, oh, Harry will deal with it?
Yeah. Red flag! Ofsted! Red flag!
Literally, like when... who is it in the Deathly Hallows? at the wedding.
Elphius Dodge and Aunt Muriel.
Aunt Muriel. And she's just like, did you know him at all? I'm just like...
Well, clearly we didn't.
Clearly not. The fact that Dumbledore has just asked Snape to keep an eye on him, and that's the only safeguard that he's put in place, besides obviously like the traps. But it's like, if you know it's Quirrell, and you know Voldemort's got a hand in this, why are you just like letting things play out?
Yeah.
You're bloody Dumbledore. You've got the Elder Wand, for Christ's sake.
Use it.
Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you know Quirrell is the person, like, you're not just going to like threaten Quirrell for an entire year going like, you better not steal that stone.
I know. Ooh.
Like, it's one of the infuriating things about the plot behind like the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah. But c'est la vie.
It is what it is. That's what we got for the books, and I can't really dispute with it because it's there. It's written.
Yeah. Gospel.
Exactly. Okay, so I think that kind of wraps everything up for this episode, don't you think?
It certainly does, good sir.
So with that, we will be moving swiftly on. Oh, it's here.
It's here. Is it The Man with Two Faces?
It is. It's the final chapter of the Philosopher's Stone. We've got 2 more episodes of season 1. This is it.
This is it.
We've nearly done 1 whole season.
I know, I cannot believe that. I
Oh
know.
my God. So, yes, next week we are going to be going through chapter 17, The Man with Two Faces. So, as always, thank you guys so much for listening. Keep your radios tuned in for next week's episode. And if you haven't already, make sure to favourite our podcast to never miss an episode, or to subscribe down below to our YouTube channel to see our pretty faces every week. And if you haven't already, please make sure to click on these 2 videos over here to catch up on any videos or episodes that you have yet to watch.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I will be saying to you this evening, a cherry bubbles.
Kindest regards.
Bye-bye.